Welcome into Point, Kentucky, everybody. It is our first episode. My name is Hunter Mitchell, and I'm sure you recognize the face sitting next to me. That is Leah Edmond, former Kentucky Volleyball great. You played 2016 to 2018, is that right, Leah?
Yep, that is correct.
It's crazy that it's already been 4 years since you were playing for Kentucky. It's making me feel old, so I can only imagine how old it's making you feel already.
It's crazy. It's just like the girls that were getting recruited while I was playing are now almost graduating. So, it's insane to see.
Yeah, it's crazy. It feels like it was just yesterday since you were playing Memorial. I mean, it kind of was because you got to play again in the spring. So, I mean, I guess maybe we're kind of right there. But since you were playing in Kentucky, I guess it feels like it was just yesterday. Well, like I said, my name is Hunter Mitchell. This is Point, Kentucky. We are so excited to bring you the first episode of the show. This has been something that I think that a lot of people have kind of asked for in terms of we want more volleyball coverage in Kentucky, but we don't really know how to get it, right? Whether that's, doing radio, calling the games on the radio, or having more journalists and writers covering the team or getting more stories out, and different outlets have tried to do that. I've done it with a few outlets over the course of my time as a journalist covering the team, but so excited that KSR has brought myself on and Leah to kind of provide more of an in-depth volleyball coverage for you all. This is a sport that I think, especially in the last 5 years, especially in the state of Kentucky, has really blown up. Obviously, Kentucky winning the national title in 2020, technically 21, whichever COVID year made it weird dates. That helped a lot of it, right? COVID, I think, once the spring came back, it was, well, volleyball is the only thing on, and everyone was like, well, it's something, let's just watch it. And I think that was actually really great for the sport. So volleyball has been growing very rapidly, especially in Kentucky the last several years, and I think this is a really exciting opportunity for both of us to really kind of hopefully help continue that trend, because I think obviously Leah is very passionate about it. She's been playing it for, who knows how long, and I've been covering it now. This is my ninth year, going into my ninth year covering the team. So we're both super excited to be here, super excited for you all to be here, and hopefully you'll learn a little bit more about the sport and the game, and we're going to talk about Kentucky, obviously. But also get into kind of some of the stories behind each individual player and the coach and all that kind of stuff. So let's first introduce the hosts. You all know Leah, and we're going to do a very in-depth coverage of Leah here in a minute, catching up with her and all that kind of stuff. But you probably don't know me. My name is Hunter Mitchell. I've been covering Kentucky volleyball actually since my freshman year of college. I went to Kentucky, graduated in 2018, got a degree in journalism. I was a scrappy freshman who was very excited to be on the campus, and I went and joined the Kentucky Colonel, the student newspaper, as a photographer. And the first sport they ever had me photograph was volleyball. Didn't have a clue what I was watching. And this was the year before Leah was a freshman. She was a year behind me. So this was a while ago. Didn't have a clue what I was watching, but I was like, I need to be here more often. This is a lot of fun. So I photographed every volleyball game after, and I don't think I've missed a game since. Or if I have, it's been because I've been called away for football or something, and football, they don't really get much of a choice for that. So, but I have fallen in love with the sport. It's a super exciting game to watch and be a part of. And obviously that's just from me watching it on the sidelines and interviewing after the game. So you all know Leah. Leah had a very successful, feels like not a big enough word for you, Leah. How would you describe your career at Kentucky?
Oh my goodness. I don't even, that's a good one. Maybe impactful, I think my career at Kentucky was my personality. So it was out of the box, not what any of us expected to happen, but very, very grateful for the experiences and the things I got to do there.
Absolutely. If you don't know who Leah is, if you've been living under a rock, Leah is the all-time leader in kills at Kentucky. Do you know how many you have, Leah? Do you know what that number is? I've got it. I'm just curious if you know what it is.
I'm going to guess. I think it's 1,983.
78, 5 off. Not bad.
I knew it. The only reason I remember it is because they kept telling me that if we made it to the Elite Eight my senior year, I would have hit 2,000 kills.
And you broke it in the match against Alabama. Now, that's not when you said it. I think you broke it against Alabama. And it was a road game, too, because I was mad I couldn't cover it. That was a big deal. And, yeah. I was very upset I wasn't there to photograph that one. Do you know what you are in... I found this stat out the other day. Do you know what you are... You probably do. I might have texted you this. What you are in terms of aces, total aces at Kentucky, where you rank all time?
I don't know. I know where I rank for a season, the season that I top spin, but other than that, I have no clue why.
You rank 5th. I had no idea you were 5th. In the 25-point rally scoring era, you were 5th in aces. You want to guess how many you have total? 4 years.
4 years. I'll say like 120.
95.
That's a big number. I went way
Yeah.
higher than I
You
thought.
went way
But
high. You
I
went
went,
way
I went
high.
way. I don't know. I mean, some of the numbers out there are outrageous. So I went high. I'm okay with it being low.
And we'll do one more fun stat for you. Do you know what you are in the 25-point rally scoring era in block solos? This also surprised me. I didn't know you had this many.
You're surprised. I don't know either. I'll go 7.
You're eighth, and you had
Okay.
35. And the
Oh.
fun fact is Johnny Teeler, who is currently playing for Kentucky, she is currently at 11th with 28. So she's probably going to pass you this
She's
season.
definitely passing me.
Yeah,
If
I
she
think
if she doesn't pass me, I'd be very, very shocked.
you're going to have bragging rights if she doesn't. You can make sure you text her and
Like
tell her that she's got work to do.
it's like in your middle.
Do you remember? So your high kill total at Kentucky was 30. Do you remember
Yep.
what match that was?
Florida, my senior year in Gainesville.
I think it's the most absurd volleyball match I've ever watched at Kentucky.
Me
You
too.
had 30 and Allie
Allie.
Stumler had 27. I think if I remember right, Kentucky as a team had 62 total kills and you and Allie had 57 of them.
It was insane.
And
That game was
Florida could
insane.
not do anything with you. I mean,
One of my favorite all-time games I've ever played in. Like
and
it's it was
guys,
so great.
you guys won that one in 5. That was a fun one to watch.
Yeah.
Well, we've kind of given an introduction to Leah, so let's introduce the podcast, what the purpose of it is. Again, surface level, it might seem like it's just a kind of a generic podcast. Let's cover Kentucky volleyball, right? And we are going to be doing that. That's going to be a big part of it. But I think when Leah and I first started talking about this, and Leah, I want you to chime in here too, one of the really important things that we were talking about is, yes, we want to cover Kentucky, but we want to grow the sport in any way that we can, whether that's education, whether it's telling stories, all of that kind of stuff are ways that when you think about the revenue sports, right, the basketball, football, that kind of stuff, obviously those are bringing in the big money makers, and those are what most people are really attracted to. But when you get down to some of these smaller revenue sports, you really get to get close to the program. It's a lot more intimate. I mean, even just covering it, covering the team, like it's crazy how many. Every athlete has a story. Every person has a story, regardless of what walk of life you're in. But especially in volleyball, I've gotten to tell a lot of stories and see a lot of those stories, and I think that's one of the things that's really important to Leah and I. Obviously the Leah Edmonds, right? The big names, the ones that are on the ESPN, all that kind of stuff. But every team has, is it 15 athletes in volleyball? Is that right?
Yeah, just
Every
about.
team. Yeah, every team has 15. They all have individual stories. They all have their own role and unique thing that they're providing to the squad. And I think it's important for us to, yes, cover Kentucky and talk about the season and talk about, obviously how they're doing, but also find a platform to be able to introduce you all to some of the athletes that are actually playing for this sport. And Leah, I know that was a big thing that you were really passionate about. I remember doing a story on you. I think it was your sophomore year, maybe. And again, even in that, I knew you a little bit just from covering the team, but like hearing you talk about being an inspiration to young black women and being able to be that role model for them was really important to you. And I would love for you to talk just about, as a former athlete, talk about what that means to you and why that's so important to you now.
I mean, having a platform is just such a big deal. I think you always see the stories about the football players, the basketball players, you see their stories, you get to see deep where they come from and things like that. And for us, it's just kind of like you see the player. You never get to hear our stories where we come from, and especially in our sport being already such a niche sport, but like it's also now the number one high school sports for girls in high school. So that means that it's reaching to places and corners that we never thought it would be. And so that means that now more than ever, those girls need to have someone to be able to look up to, someone to be able to follow, someone to want to emulate their game after. I mean, that's all you ever see with football and basketball is like, I want to be like LeBron James, or I want to be like Kobe or Steph, or I want to be Patrick Mahomes. Like I want to be those people because I'm able to see those people. And so in order for those girls to have the influence and the want to be just like some of my teammates or former teammates, they have to put them on a platform. And so I think it's a really big deal to be able to give them the chance to talk about themselves, be able to connect with people, because you'd be shocked how much you can connect with an athlete right after you hear one story. So I'm just really excited to give them the chance to talk about themselves, because sometimes you need to sit there and talk about what you've been through in order to show why you are. I think getting to explore that, I mean, you're on a national stage, they're on ESPN, you see these people, you see only one aspect of their life, and I think it's really cool if you're able to get a full picture of who this person is. It makes you want to cheer for them more and want to see them succeed just more.
And I think that sometimes when we're watching a team that we're fans of or that we're covering, whatever, it can get very surface level, right, in terms of watching and seeing what you're looking on the screen. So like a primary example, when Ajani Teeler moved from a right side hitter to a middle blocker, she's what? Is she 5'9" or 5'10"? One of the two. Regardless, she
I'll
is
give her 5'10".
incredibly undersized for a middle blocker.
Yeah.
And I remember going to the exhibition match of that, and I spent 5 minutes trying to figure out what Ajani was playing because for those of you that don't know, I'm writing and I'm photographing whenever I'm covering a volleyball game. So I'm looking through a lens. It's very tiny. I can't really see. It takes me a while to figure that kind of stuff out. So it took me a solid 5 minutes to say, is Craig Skinner playing Ajani Teeler as a middle blocker right now? What is happening? Did someone get hurt in practice? Are they just short on middles? What's going on? And I think throughout the course of that season, eventually leading to a freaking national title, clearly Craig knows what he's doing. He's not new at this. I think you saw like how integral that move was and how, again, the story that I eventually wrote on Ajani was just how I think in preseason Craig had a piece of paper and he wrote down he wrote libero, setter, middle blocker, and like maybe a outside hitter or something, and he said, which do you think you can play? And she like circled one and was like, I don't know, maybe a libero or something. Is this a trick question? And he looked at her and said, I want you as the middle blocker. And so that story was about not only her embracing that and not doubting, like, hey, I'm 5'10", right? And most middles are, 6'2", 6'3", 6'4", 6'5". How exactly are we gonna make this work? And then she makes a run to play Texas in the title game, which is arguably one of the most physical and largest blocking teams in the country. And as a 5'10" middle blocker, she helps Kentucky win a national title. So I think little stories like that, where if you weren't paying attention to the year before, and didn't know where Ajani played on the right side the year before, or if you didn't really know what you were looking at and understanding, you wouldn't know that story, right? And so I think that's one of the big goals that Leah and I have, is just finding ways to tell, yes, the story of the team and how are they doing and what do they look like going to the tournament and are they going to win another SEC title? All of that's obviously very important, but what are each individual athlete? What are they going through? How are they contributing to the team? And how is what they're doing impacting the overall success of Kentucky volleyball? And I think that's one of the things that we're really, really excited about. So kind of give you an idea of like the basic structure. We're going to come on every week and probably do 3, 4, 5-ish segments. Like we mentioned, we're going to try and have athletes and coaches, and we may even have some analysts during the season, just people on that can talk about whether it's their story or if we're in the heart of the season, analysts, where does Kentucky look in terms of the national scene, all that kind of stuff. Again, to really make sure that you're also not just hearing me and Leah, but hearing people that are inside of the program and around the program and all that kind of stuff. One of the things we're really excited about is Leah. Like we talked about, we really want to make sure that we're growing the education of the sport. And Leah is going to be doing a segment for us every single week where it's called Acing It with Leah. We talked about her being 5th all time in service aces in the rally points in the rally scoring era. She's going to be doing Acing It with Leah. Leah, why don't you explain what that segment's going to be?
So basically, it's going to be me giving you 2 to 3 tips a week, because that's the average aces that you see in the game is about 2 to 3. So I'm giving you 2 to 3 tips or information on about the game of volleyball. So whether that's how we rotate, the jobs of the positions, offenses and defenses, because there's so many schemes and plays that you would never know are happening behind the scenes, and just strategy and things you're not looking for or thinking about before. And so now you can go to a game on a weekend and be like, I just heard that on Thursday. Now I know exactly what she's talking about. So then you can have a more holistic picture of the volleyball game, understand the game. So then you can go tell your friends, look at this, and then you can tell them what you learned too. So just really helping people understand the game, because there's a lot more than just keeping the ball off the court, which is
there is. And it's funny the number of people that I'm sure they come to YouTube, they're like, I didn't realize there were plays in volleyball. And I'm like, yes, there are plays in every other sport. Of course there are plays in volleyball. I think a lot of people just think it's kind of a random crapshoot. When you dig the ball, hopefully you will just hit it over the net. But there are very much, very, very specific plays that you all... What was your favorite play when you were at Kentucky, Leah? Do you remember?
It kind of depends on rotation, but my definite favorite was when in serve receive, sometimes I'd go all the way outside the pin and look like I'm coming to hit like a normal ball, and then I would scoot all the way inside and hit an inside ball instead of the middle. And so those were fun, because first I got to play middle again, because I used to be a middle, and so that was fun, but also just kept teams on their toes because they never know where we were coming. Or I loved sneaking on the back line and coming in and running a back row attack. I think that's what I was really known for. Yeah. But I love a back row attack.
Yes, you did. I remember some of them. I think a clip of a back row attack that you had came up on my Twitter feed recently, and I was like, I forgot what that looked like. I forgot the way that Leah was... Because, again, when I covered Leah, I was still relatively new in volleyball. I wasn't watching it a lot nationally. It was kind of just watching Kentucky when they were at Memorial or on the road. And so now that I've watched it a lot nationally and I'm actually following the sport in general, I'm like, man, didn't really get to appreciate that when she was playing in Kentucky. And then they went and won the title the year... Was it the year after that you graduated they won the title?
Like 9 months after I graduated.
Yeah, that's usually how it works. They just, we'll just wait until she's gone.
Yeah, that's fine.
You should have texted Allie Stumler after that and said, hey, appreciate that. Thanks for doing it this way.
I literally was like, y'all, it was the same starting lineup. Mine was like 2 of us. Come on now. I was
you're right. You are right. Who was the other one that left with you?
Leah Meyer.
Leah Meyer, yes, it was. I forgot.
Leahs.
Yep, she was the
same
middle.
Starting lineup without the Leahs, and I was like, "Come on, y'all."
They just had to get the Leahs out of the program, and then it was all right. Title time. That's what that was.
They're like, "We're ready now. We can do it now."
Well, Leah, let's catch up with you a little bit because obviously we talked about your Kentucky career, but you are still playing volleyball. So for those that don't know, why don't you tell us about what in the world you are doing now? Because you're actually a part of 2 pro leagues now.
I am, and it's super exciting because they're in the States, which is like totally like unheard of. Haven't done something like this since the 80s. Most volleyball players, if they want to continue after their college career, they have to go overseas, which is Europe, Asia, South America, and Puerto Rico as well. And so it was just coming out of COVID. I didn't think I was going to ever play again, and I got the opportunity to play with a league called Athletes Unlimited, which is I'm literally leaving like in a month to go play in, which I'm really excited about, and that's also the same league that I got to play Kentucky with. Really cool league. They have 4 different sports. It's not normal pro sports. You are only playing for about 5 weeks, and each week you get a new team. Mm-hmm. It's set on a leaderboard, and you're ranked 1 through 42, and every skill in volleyball has a point. In every set you get points, and match you get points, and by those points, the top 4 people who top 4 point scorers are captains, and they draft their own team. So every week I'm playing with new people on a new team, and it is a really, really cool opportunity. I'm going in my 4th season with them, which is really exciting. And then I play for another league called the Professional Volleyball Federation, and that's starting in January. Whole new league, and it's a bit more traditional. So there's 7 cities, 7 teams in each city. You have your roster of 14. You travel around, play, have a playoff, and then you win for a championship. So very more like NFL, NBA, MLB, that type of layout of like normal volleyball, like overseas. But I've also played in Puerto Rico, which was really cool too. They treat volleyball there like Kentuckians treat basketball. You have a city, each city has their own team, and I mean, it was probably one of the coolest experiences I've ever had, like people playing drums and blowing horns while I'm playing and swinging a ball, and you hear a horn and you just got to focus because I'm like, oh my God, there was a horn, and I'm trying to hit a ball at the same time. But yeah, really cool. It's been exciting to help grow the game professionally because I mean, when I was in college, I was just like, oh, I got to go overseas. I have to leave my family. I have to be 8 hours away in some foreign country. And now we're in the midst of building something so all the girls that are in high school and college now don't have to go overseas and go so far away from home to play. And we have the platform that people are able to continue to follow us out of college. I think that was the huge issue when I was little growing up was I had my favorite players. They graduated from college and I had no clue where they went. And I never got to watch them again. So it was either depending on watching new girls in college or watching the Olympics every 4 years. But so it's really exciting that people will be able to continue watching some of their favorite college players in the States and play so close to home because I'll be in Atlanta, which is 5 hours away from home, which is really exciting.
And Leah, you were one of the first people in Athletes Unlimited, right? You were the inaugural year was the year that you first started, correct?
Yep, it was during COVID, playing with Basque. It was quite the experience. But yeah, we were part of that first group that got to do it, and I loved it and the opportunities they gave us and kept playing with them.
And there's exciting news because you have 2 former Wildcats joining you in Athletes this year. You want to talk about that?
Yep. So for Athletes Unlimited, me and Allie Stumler and Kaz Brown will all 3 be playing in that league. And all three of us, again, will be playing in Pro Volleyball Federation as well. And me and Allie will be on the same team in Atlanta, and Kaz will be in Orlando, which won't be too far away. So it's really exciting that I finally get to be with my teammates. I was like one of the only people that have yet to like had anybody from like the SEC. There's only like 2 of us from the SEC playing in any of my leagues. So I was really excited that I finally got my teammates with me. I've been pushing for it for so long.
I have got to see a game of you and Allie against Kaz Brown. I have to watch Kaz attempting to block you. That's got to be... that's must-see television.
It'll be so weird to see her on like the other side of the net. Like, I mean, even coming up in Athletes Unlimited, it'll be so weird for her to like be blocking me because she knows all my tendencies, but I know all hers too. So it'll be fun.
For those of you that have been following Kentucky volleyball for a while, you probably remember this is my favorite match that I have ever watched. Kentucky. It's actually maybe the best sporting event, regardless of what sport it was, that I've ever been to. Do you know which one I'm talking about, Leah? Just based off of that.
Western
NCAA
Kentucky.
tournament. Kentucky played Western in the NCAA tournament. That was the year that you all had 5 seniors. It was Ashley Dushek, Kaz Brown, Emily Franklin, that squad. That was the first year Kentucky ever got a top 4 seed, which again, we'll kind of go, this is kind of some volleyball jargon. We'll dive into that, as the season goes on with Leah and the Ace It with Leah segment. But that was, a big deal for Kentucky. That was one of Craig's best teams that he'd ever had. And was it the second round or was it the first round, Leah, that you all played Western?
It was the second round.
Second round. So Western came in with Alyssa Kavanaugh, who's unfortunately passed away, and they went up 2-0 on Kentucky. And this was Western always travels well, especially in that NCAA tournament. So there was a lot of red in Memorial that day. And when you all went down 0-2, I thought, oh my goodness, Western is going to come in and pull off the upset of the century. And something in that locker room between Kaz Brown and Leah Edmond clicked, and they came out. And they rattled off the next 3 sets and came back in one of the most absurd matches I've ever seen. I don't know what Craig said to you all in that locker room, but something happened.
That tournament itself was just insane. Just like it feels like, and that's like one of the most memorable times of like my volleyball career. I will always talk about that year because it's like, first of all, we played like, I think 3 or 4 5-set matches in like a week and a half.
Yeah,
BYU was a 5-set match. Western was a 5-set match. Nebraska was a 4-set match. I mean, I had just so many memories from that time, like from on the court and off the court. I mean, on the court, just we were like making history. Every time at that point, every time that we stepped on the court, we were making history, no matter what we did. And so like that part of it was just like so cool. And just off the court, like just seeing how many people like rallied around us during that time, and like all the other sports. Like my favorite story was we were playing BYU, and my dad told me this because he coaches the football team. They had a team meeting, and Coach Stoops walks into the meeting room and no one was in there. And he was like, where's the team? Like, where is everybody? Like, is there something going on? The whole team was in the locker room watching us play BYU. And I remember I got so many videos. I saw so many pictures on Snapchat. It was probably one of the coolest things I'd ever seen, because I was just kind of like, out of all the teams, of course, that team is down in the locker room watching us play. And it was just like so cool the way that the entire city just kind of rallied around us while we were trying to make one of the biggest runs we ever had in Kentucky volleyball history.
And Leah, correct me if I'm wrong, but I mean, I kind of feel like that was almost the launching pad for what we've seen in Kentucky recently with the volleyball program. That kind of was the run that started people going, okay, let's tune into this sport. But also just from a recruiting standpoint, it felt like the recruiting picked up even more. More athletes were tuning into Kentucky and going, oh, let's go to Kentucky. And then obviously Craig got that #1 recruiting class with Maddie Skinner and Reagan Rutherford, all of those that eventually helped win the national title. But I feel like that run was kind of the launching pad for what we've seen in Kentucky in volleyball here recently.
I mean, I think it was Craig's first SEC championship, so that started the 6-year-long streak now. I think
6 right now. 6. Yeah, they've won 6 straight.
And I think that just kind of showed we were capable of doing it. And I mean, that's why I chose Kentucky. Like, I knew Kentucky was on the cusp of doing something great. We just needed some type of push. And we were so close my freshman year. We were 1 game away.
You lost
from
to Tennessee. If you would have beaten, I think Tennessee going into that match was 12-13. I mean, it was a game where
we had beat them the week before.
Yep, you had trounced them the week before, and I remember going, oh, this should be a pretty easy one because they're a 500 team, no issue. And I remember that.
Yeah, and then we found out that like that wasn't the first time that Tennessee had spoiled SEC championship hopes. So just kind
Hmm.
of just put it in there. So after that year, we were like, enough of this. Like we're not losing anymore. We're not. It's not going to be one game away from a championship anymore. Like we're winning it. I think that mentality, the way that the players took over, and the way that Craig let us do that, and I
Yep.
think that really changed the landscape because then it set up the rest of the year. So after that, my 2017 year, we all knew the blueprint. We knew the
Right.
layout. We knew what we needed to do now, how we needed to play, and what we were capable of, and what we could possibly do. And I think after that, I mean, we made every Sweet 16 at
You
least
did.
after
Yep.
that, and it hasn't stopped. And I think it just like kind of changed the mentality of the whole program of like, oh wait, we're in there now. Like you got to consider us one of the top teams in the nation now. And that's an every season thing, not just like
Right.
coming off of a good season. It's every season now we're expected to be top 10 at least, and that's how it should be. And I think it just changed the whole landscape of the program because now you're getting all these top recruits that maybe when I was in high school, it was a 50-50 chance you're getting. And now
Right.
it's almost kind of like, no, they're coming to Kentucky. I mean, it's the perfect in between of the Nebraskas and the Texas and the Penn States. Like we're right there. Like, I mean, we're in the SEC. SEC is extremely competitive. And I think we're in the perfect place, the perfect city, perfect university to do really great things.
And if you aren't familiar with volleyball, Florida was the SEC title went through Florida for decades. I mean, it was just Florida every year. And so I think now, if you've paid attention to preseason, Florida's not being picked preseason to win the whole league anymore. It's Kentucky, and that's been the case for several years. And obviously Kentucky and Florida have shared it a few times in the last several years. But for Kentucky to win back to back was a big deal because they'd only ever done it one time before, and then you got to back to back to back. And now it's been 4 in a row, and then it was 5 in a row, and now it's sitting at 6 in a row and 6 in a row. And again, that team that Leah's talking about, her sophomore year team, they really led that charge and helped. Or was that your freshman team, Leah?
That was sophomore.
That was your sophomore. Okay.
That was Madison Williams' freshman year.
Yes. That's kind of, I think, absolutely been a very big snowball to the success the program's having now. Do you remember, this might be salt in the wound, but we're going to talk about it anyway. Do you remember the 2 teams that you lost to in the NCAA tournament in Kentucky? There were 2. If you played 4 years, but you only lost to 2 teams in the NCAA tournament.
Nebraska and Washington.
Yep, you lost to Nebraska your freshman year. You had 2 losses to Washington in the middle, and then you lost to Nebraska again your senior year.
Oh god.
It was such a weird bookend for you. I was like, Leah,
really
what is it about these 2?
It was just those 2 teams, and I was just like, couldn't believe it. I was like, are you for real? Like, I remember flying all the way out to Washington,
Yep.
and the crazy thing is, guess who we played? Who Kentucky's playing tomorrow?
Mm-hmm.
We played Colorado State the first
Yep.
round, went Washington the second round, got absolutely crushed. And I was like, okay, that's my first tournament ever. Like I hope it doesn't go like that. And then we lost to Nebraska sophomore, junior year, and then
Yep.
ended the year with a Washington in my senior.
Yep.
Yeah. No, I
For whatever reason, we found Leah's kryptonite. For whatever reason, it's purple and red. I don't really know why, but I say red, but you were undefeated against Louisville, so it's not red. It's not all shades of
very
red.
true. And in my college and pro career too, I never lost to Louisville. I didn't lose to Louisville in the spring. We played Louisville.
Oh, you're right. Okay, I was like, what do you mean? That's true. Did that one go 4 or 5?
It went to 5.
It did. I was going to say, I'm pretty sure Louisville took a few sets off of you.
Oh, they were slinging away. I loved it. I was like, right, way to go. I loved it how well.
What was that
teams
like?
played.
What was it like playing against colleges?
It was
Again.
so cool. It was really cool, especially because I got to go back to some places that I'd played before, like Minnesota and Texas and Louisville. But then I also got to see like programs and places that I'd never seen before, like Penn State. I grew up everything Penn State. Like when I just started playing volleyball, it's when they went on that huge, like they won like what 3 or 4 national championships in a row. That was like when I was coming up. So like that's all I knew. And so being able to see that and just playing, we had to play in convention centers in the middle of club tournaments. It was probably one of the coolest things I've ever done. Just because you see volleyball is like people care about volleyball.
Yeah.
Like all those stands were packed at every single game, even at Howard. It was just packed. And it is so cool to see people just like wanting to see that. And I love seeing as a pro looking at a college player how fearless they were being. Because you're playing a bunch of pros, a bunch of women that, I mean, there were girls that I'm playing with that I watched play. Like, so that's the age difference. And so to know that they were playing just as fearless and they had no fear was like something really, really cool. And I'm like, that's a confidence boost to you all because it doesn't matter who's across the net. If you play like that against people your age, guess what's going to happen? Like really good things are going to happen. And it was just a cool experience. I mean, playing in Memorial again, I was like almost brought to tears because I was just like, there's so many memories and I'm like, I'm home. And it just felt like home. And seeing my family sit in the same seats that they had sat in, I mean, the 2 years before I got here and then the 4 years that I played at Kentucky, it was just so cool. It was such a surreal feeling. It was one of those experiences I'll never forget.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but Athletes Unlimited is also, this year, they're broadcasting all the matches on television, right?
Yeah, so we got moved to the fall so we could play in conjunction with college volleyball. So we got an ESPN deal, which was super, super exciting. And ESPN wanted us to play around college volleyball. I think with how many big, I mean, we have college volleyball on ABC and on ESPN this year, like, and just adding us on top of that, I cannot wait for how this fall is going to look and being able to play at the same time and have so much volleyball and just as much volleyball content as you're getting football content. Like, just, it's going to be all over the place. And I was like, this is really exciting. Like, this is the perfect time for the sport to be getting all the love it deserves, because it really does deserve so much more.
So you guys can watch Kentucky volleyball and then turn the channel and watch Allie Stumler, Allie Linehan now, and Leah Edmond and Kaz Brown, former Kentucky Wildcats, playing possibly with or against each other. So you got a lot of volleyball content coming your way this fall, which is really, really exciting. Well, why don't we transition now to what we've been kind of hinting at. The start of the season last week, we had the WKU exhibition. Kentucky played in Rupp Arena for the first time. They'll be playing all of their home games at Rupp this year because Memorial's obviously undergoing renovation. They only have 2 home games in the non-conference. Actually, they have one. They will have one home game. I'm sorry, they only have one home game in Rupp Arena this year during the non-conference, and that's against Pittsburgh, which is a top 5 team. Pitt's the team that they made a Final Four last year, lost to Louisville in 5. That was another one of those crazy matches that went the distance. So it's going to be a challenging non-conference, especially for Kentucky, given that you are playing on the road, whether you are actually on the road or whether you're on a neutral site game, whatever the case may be. Kentucky has 5 ranked games this year. They might have this is just in the non-conference. They might have a 6th if they play Purdue. There's one of those tournaments where if they win, they play Purdue, and if they lose, they play another team. So they could possibly have a 6th game against a ranked team. So Craig always likes boosting the RPI. In volleyball, RPI is a big deal, and Craig loves giving you all loves giving Kentucky a hard non-conference schedule. And this year they have a doozy. A lot of road games, and you're playing Nebraska. You're playing Louisville, who was obviously in the title game, on the road. You're playing Pitt, who's in the Final Four, on the road and at home. You're playing a Houston team that's ranked right now in the preseason. Western was your exhibition game, and they're ranked 24th in the preseason poll. So Kentucky has its work cut out for them, but they looked really good in the Western game. Did you get a chance to watch them, Leah?
I did. I saw tons of clips, and I was watching every tweet and stat line that I possibly could. And I think you're seeing exactly what you want to see going into a season. I mean, I got to play them in the spring, and I already saw so many differences and improvements from the spring to the fall. And that's what you want to see. And you see people stepping up that haven't before, and people playing better than they did last year. And so that was really exciting to see. It was really exciting to see also the depth that they have, and especially in the pin position. I was expecting it. Going into this year, I knew that pin position was going to be something to fight for. I mean, they have Aaron, they have Brooklyn, that's a freshman that I mean,
phenomenal.
I have been a fan of her. I saw her at camp one year, and I was like, oh, she's going to do some damage. She is going to do some damage. And then you have Megan as a transfer. This will be her first official season playing with Kentucky. I mean, you have so many weapons. You're bringing back so many veterans. I mean, I think basically your entire starting lineup from last year, you're bringing back people who have been in every possible circumstance you'd want to be in, and they're getting better. Like, that's exactly where you want to be. And so having this struggle or challenging of a preseason will really show you just almost little things that you got to work on, because at this point you know what you have, you know what they can do. Now it's just fine-tuning some of those things that when you go into conference you can rock and roll, and by the time you get to tournament you'll be on fire.
And one of the things last year, Leah, that I think a lot of people were pointing to was obviously Maddie Skinner transferred to Texas before the season started last year. I don't know that Kentucky was behind in the pin position, but they didn't have the depth that I think Craig probably would have liked to see. Obviously, you had Haley Melby coming in as a freshman. You had some transfers, but as great as they played for Kentucky and as good as they were, Adana Rollins felt like sometimes she was carrying too much of the load, and it felt like Kentucky's offense was a bit too predictable. And I think that's why ultimately they weren't able to. They were a good team last year. I mean, people forget they took Louisville to 5, and that was a Louisville team that eventually went to the title game. So, they were young last year, a lot of sophomores that, Emma Grome and Eleanor Bevan, people that they played as freshmen. Obviously, they were starters, but getting another year under their belt, and they were still young players. That was a team that made a lot of noise and was really, really talented. They just ultimately weren't able to get over the hump, I think, because their offense at times is a little bit too one-dimensional. And I think, like you said, one of the biggest things that we learned in that Western game was the depth that they have. Craig talked about it in the preseason, but again, I've covered the team for 9 years. It's coach speak, right? Sometimes you wonder, do they believe that, or are they just saying it because, obviously you're not going to say we have no depth. I mean, we're not going to come into the season saying that to all your opponents. But, so we all heard him say that this is going to be one of his deeper teams. And I think, playing Western and Western taking that second set, tying the matchup, he really got to play with some of the lineups. And I think you're right. The pin, that secondary pin hitting position is going to be really interesting. I think Erin Lamb is pretty much solidified her spot. I think she's been one of the biggest breakout stars for me, just in terms of watching her in the spring. And then now, I think part of that is she's finally healthy. For those that don't know, she's dealt with back injuries for most of her career playing. And just from talking to her in the preseason and after the Western game, she sounds like she is healthier than she has maybe ever been. That was a big goal of hers during the preseason. And so I think you've seen a lot of growth from her. She had 12 kills and hit 320 on the night. Only had 3 errors too, which through 4 sets is a pretty solid number. Again, I think at times early in her career, Erin, if she saw a ball go out of bounds or hit into the block, she'd kind of get frustrated and overcompensate, and you'd see those errors pile up. She's slowly figuring that out. Now when you watch her, errors don't seem to bother her. She's got a lot more tools in her toolbox, so to speak, in terms of the shots that she can hit. And I think she's having a lot of success just, again, in the Western game that we saw, but then even against you all and Athletes Unlimited. I was so impressed with what she was able to do against pros. I mean, again, these are teams that know how to block, know how to move, and she was using the blocker's hands as opposed to early in her career. I think sometimes she would swing into them. And I think that's a big part of going to be what Kentucky can do this year is what does that pin look like? Like you mentioned, Brooklyn, the freshman, she was phenomenal. She only played 2 sets and she had 10 kills and she had no errors. Yeah, she didn't have a single error, hit 625. And I was impressed with her. I mean, she dug the ball. Her spin, her top spin serve was...
Yeah.
I mean, Western had nothing to do with it.
Yeah,
it looked like yours when you were a freshman.
They were, I mean, that's what I'm saying. I've seen them during camp, and I've seen them just playing around and just coming in as high school. They were like, I remember standing there like, I couldn't do this in high school.
Right.
And they're coming in being able to do this as freshmen, and that's insane. I was like, she's the one. She's the one who's going to try to break every record that I probably got to set. I was like, she's the one that might catch me. I'm going to be for real. But I mean, the outside position, it's confidence. Mm-hmm. So until you build that confidence, it's going to be extremely frustrating. I think that's what's the great thing about Erin is you can finally see that confidence that she has in herself of like, you're going to make errors. For an outside to not make errors is insane no matter what level you're playing at. And so being okay with those errors and being able to make quick fixes and also having a wide range of things in your toolbox, being able to know that, okay, if I can't hit down the line this game because they're taking it away, what else can I do? How else am I going to score? Finding a way to score. But it's really exciting to know that, like, hey, it's a revolving door. And from being in the program, Craig likes that. Craig likes when there's that competition. Craig likes when you're in the gym and any day could be somebody's day and that you could be pushing somebody out. And during the preseason, there's chances that you're going to see different lineups and rotations based on people are doing, especially with the teams that they're playing this year. There is a good chance that you might see a revolving door for a little bit until they find the group that works the best around with each other.
Leah, let's talk a little bit about Megan. You kind of mentioned her, the incoming transfer from Oklahoma. You know, she had a really solid career at Oklahoma, and she actually played all 6 rotations. And I think one of the things when I was scouting her when she initially committed to Kentucky that was really appealing about her was she is 6'5", playing as an outside, which is massive. That's a very large outside hitter. But also, she played 6 rotations, and she was very good at it, and especially from behind the service line. Because she's so tall, the contact point that she's hitting that ball at, she's hitting down across the net against you. And she was the leader in aces in the Big 12 for Oklahoma. And so I think the prospect of having someone like Megan, obviously, like you said, it's going to be a competition between her and Brooklyn and all of the rest of the outsides for that secondary spot, I think. I think the interesting thing here is you also have a competition from behind the service line from both Megan and Brooklyn. Both of them offer unique, because Brooklyn's also, I think she's 6'3", maybe. She's also a very big hitter. Both of them offer something different for Kentucky, and I think, again, in this recent run of years that Kentucky has had, a lot of their success has happened from behind the service line. And again, talking to Craig this year before the season, he talked about this very well could be one of his best serving teams, if not the best serving team ever. And I think some of these outsides, Brooklyn and Megan, are going to be big parts of that. So what does that look like? Obviously, you have to have a competition from a hitting standpoint, but talk about what's it like when you're literally so even-keeled that you're competing from behind the service line and competing from behind the back row and competing in the... I mean, did you have to do that at all? Obviously, Allie played with you, so I'm sure you all were going at it in practice all the time.
Yeah, I mean, for us, it's just kind of like the little things. Who's going to do little things the best? So then when you have people that can compete hitting, you can compete from the service line. Now what are you doing digging-wise? What are you doing passing-wise? How well are you blocking? And it's gonna literally come down to like just little minuscule things. And it might not even be skill sometimes. Sometimes it just might be mental. Like if we're in practice and it's 25-25, how are you responding?
Yeah.
What are you doing? Can you withstand being in this long period of time of pushing and pushing and pushing? And sometimes and that's like the crazy thing about volleyball is just sometimes choices aren't made based on skill. They're based on mental, because our game is so mental. You start making errors and people around you start getting frustrated. You get frustrated. It's a very kind of like I don't even know what the analogy is. I used to say it all the time on commentating. It's just like it takes one thing to mess up a whole big thing.
It snowballs,
Yeah, it snowballs. And so you have to make sure you have the right people around you. And also it has to do with middles. Who are you matching up these outsides with the middles are? That's super important, especially rotation-wise. You want to have two people that are going to score, especially when you have your setter front row. You only have two people hitting in the front row, so you're going to need two terminal hitters. So I think finding a mix of who's going to be front row together, what's our best defensive position, and if these outsides are even playing back row. I mean, we have Audrey Whitworth, who, my goodness, is getting better and better every year. You have DSs now, and you have Mariah Walker, and you have all these people that can play. And that's kind of what happened while I was there. There were points where I didn't need to play, because it's better to have three DSs back row than to have a DS, a setter, and a hitter, or two hitters back row. It's better to have all those DSs, so then it makes it even difficult for the other team to score, because you have three people who are specialized in making sure you don't score sitting back there. So it's going to be very interesting to see how they do this. I mean, switches can be made within an instant. You got 15 subs. So it'll be very intriguing to see how he combines and who he meshes together and who meshes well together. Because at this point, you have so many skilled people, it's going to be very, very small things are going to determine whether or not you're going to play or not.
Let's talk about one more thing from that Western game. One of the things I noticed is, obviously we talked about the depth of the pins. Kentucky's deep in the middle. And I think one of the things, again, early in when I was covering Kentucky, one of the things that really stood out to me from watching from a journalist perspective is that it felt like when you get to the Pac-12, the Big Ten, against the Nebraskas and the Stanfords, there has to be middle blocker play. The middle blockers are ultimately what are going to help you win and lose a match. Just in terms, not even just in terms of scoring, but block touches, slowing the ball down so that you can have a chance to dig it. And it feels like Kentucky might have more middles that can give you good minutes than they possibly ever have. I mean, I was really interested that obviously I expected to see Ajani Cheeler start in the middle. Obviously, it's her fifth year, her super senior season. So I expected that. I didn't expect Jordan Williams to get the start. I was really surprised and actually pleasantly surprised to see her. Obviously, she had a lot of talent come into Kentucky and suffered. Was it an Achilles or an ACL tear, Leah? Do you know?
Achilles. It was Achilles.
Yeah, so we haven't really gotten to see a whole lot of her, and she, again, in the spring against you all, against athletes, I think Craig put her in, and she was a difference. I remember her coming in and being a spark. She got the start against Western, and she played really, really well, had 4 kills, and I think she only played 2 sets, so, 4 kills, hit 429, only had 1 error. She's a really good blocker from what Craig is telling me. She was the one serving for Kentucky, and she's got a good serve. Again, talking about the serving and the high contact points from your big outsides, now your big middle. I mean, there's some tall people that are serving for Kentucky, and I think when she went out, he put Elise Getzinger in. Again, she's been in Kentucky this is her senior year now. She was part of the team that won the title for Kentucky as a freshman. She came in. She had 10 kills. I mean, and again, only played two sets, only had one error. She's a lot better off 1 foot. Again, I know that's volleyball terminology. We'll get into that as the podcast goes along. But she came in and gave Kentucky a ton of great minutes. And then, again, their freshman Brooke Boltima came in and gave them a lot of great minutes. I think she led the team in blocks, or she was up there. No, yeah, she led the team in blocks that night. So I think that there is a logjam in the middle now. So you're not only going to see a competition in terms of your pin hitters, which is a luxury considering I think that's what Kentucky struggled with last year. But that middle spot is not guaranteed to any 4 of those individuals. They are all going to have to earn that.
No, and the thing about that middle spot is it's more of a revolving door than the pins are, to be completely honest, because if you're unable to set up those defenses or get involved in the offense, it becomes very typical. Every ball is going to the pins. And so if that middle is not involved, then it's very easy for defenses to read you, and it becomes an easy game for the other side. So I think that's also good because, you have Z who can hit on the right and the middle. So that already gives you way more choices and options than you would have with a normal middle. But then you have 3 other middles that also are putting balls away and also are defensively sound and very, very good at setting up blocks and making it easy for defense. I'm so happy I don't have Craig's job because that's really, really, it's really, really hard to figure that out when you have so many weapons, but that's what you want. You want to have that depth. That means that the gym's competitive. You want your practice to be more competitive than your games will ever be. And that clearly shows that it's going to be extremely hard to play against each other in the gym. So what the product you'll see on the court against other teams will be amazing. But the depth is what you want. You want that type of depth. And I don't think they've had that much depth in a long time. Maybe since I've been there, just knowing that whatever next game, you have no clue who's going to play. Even the next set, you might see a switch or something like that. I think that's a place where you want to be because then it just makes it harder for other teams, but also that makes your gym really good. That makes your program really good. And that means that no matter what year it is, even after this year, you have that growth happening. You have those weapons still here and able to keep continuing producing that year after year.
Well, the exhibition is over. The official start of the season. We're recording Thursday night, late Thursday, so technically it starts tomorrow, but you will probably be hearing this when it starts today. So Kentucky will start its season tonight at 9 o'clock. They're playing in Colorado. They're playing Colorado State. And then tomorrow, on Saturday, they'll play Northern Colorado. So, Leah, I'm interested in this. Obviously, you're excited about the start of the season. You're not. Your attention is on those 2 matchups, but we know that Kentucky plays Pittsburgh at Rupp Arena next week. And we know it's a big deal as it is that you're playing in freaking Rupp Arena. And just, all of the lore and obviously how phenomenal that is. We talked about growing the sport. I think playing at Rupp is a very big opportunity for that, being able to fit the capacity that you can and just it being in this, illustrious building. When you have to play teams, these aren't bad teams. Kentucky could very well lose this weekend, right? But when you're playing a team that's like a Northern Colorado or a Colorado State, and then you have Pittsburgh on the horizon, what is it like when you're playing? How do you make sure that you're locked in on the individual match that's directly in front of you and not thinking about what next week could be?
Well, I think it's just not underestimating your opponent. I think that's the first thing that you got to work on. Colorado State has made tournaments before. I've played them in the tournament. Yep. They're a solid team. That's a solid program. They're always going to give you a run for your money. And especially with teams like this where you're not used to seeing them, they're not the Nebraskas or Louisville or Texas. Those are teams you got to watch out for because they have a whole different type of skill set. They train completely different than what you're used to. They might have more undersized players, so that means they're smarter volleyball-wise, which means that you have more things to look out for. So you can't go into the game thinking oh, well, we're just playing this team. It's not going to be that big of a deal. You're playing teams that are trying to beat you. You're Kentucky. You're number 10 right now. They're going to come in guns blazing because they have nothing to lose. They have nothing to – they're not ranked. They're not Kentucky, so they're going to come in and play. I think you have to keep that focus because – you can come out this weekend 0-2 going into a big pit weekend. That changes completely how you train for next weekend if you come out and you don't play the way you're supposed to. So they definitely have to focus and lock in because, it's only the beginning of September. Their season doesn't end until the middle of December, hopefully. So you have to be able to play the long game. And these games matter. How you beat these teams matter. Beating a team 3-0 compared to 3-1 makes a difference in the long run. And so they have to be able to be locked in and play their opponent as they would play Pitt because that's what's expected.
And I think it's interesting you brought up a good point, especially with what the non-conference looks like for Kentucky this year. There are no gimme games, and so every single game becomes a must-win. Because again, when you start looking at RPI and what you need to make a deep run in the NCAA tournament, especially in volleyball, it's true in any sport. You need a good seed in order to actually have success in that tournament and make a good run. But in volleyball especially, that RPI is so critical. It's so important in looking at, do you get to host? How much traveling are you going to have to do? Where are you going to be playing once you're in that tournament? I think that these kinds of games, these are the ones that the committee is going to look at the end of the year and go, yeah, but man, that game against Colorado State, man, that game against Northern Colorado, those are where you want to leave the committee with no doubt. These are the games where you want to say, no, we played a hard non-conference and maybe we won some, maybe we lost some, but we took care of all the games that we needed to take care of, and those aren't on the resume, right? These games you might not come to Kentucky at the end of the year and go, man, they got this seed because they beat Northern Colorado. That doesn't mean Northern Colorado's not good. It just means that might not be a team that's going to drastically advance your seeding because you beat them, but if you lose to them, that will affect your seeding very differently, because then, like you mentioned, if you come out of this weekend 0-2 and then you're playing Pittsburgh at home and you possibly drop that one, or you go on the road and you lose to Pittsburgh at Pitt, and then you've got to play a ranked Houston team and you've got to play Louisville on the road and you've got to play Nebraska. I mean, you're right. You have to focus on each individual game. It makes every single thing become all that more important. And you hit on it earlier. Volleyball is mental. There's a lot of mental aspects to the sport, and I think that's a big thing. Again, road environments are different in volleyball, right? Because you don't have 70,000 people like you might in a football stadium, but these venues are often a lot more intimate. And you're playing at Nebraska this year, and that's not intimate at all. That's 19,000 people because they treat volleyball like they're basketball games or football games. So, you have to make sure that you are locked in on each individual game. And I think that's kind of one of the things that, we've talked about in terms of what Kentucky has looked like the last 5 years. They feel like they are very much locked in on each individual game. I feel like rarely do we look at Kentucky and think, man, they just weren't there. They just overlooked them. Used to, maybe, as Craig was building things up and really establishing that championship mindset that he wants to have and strives to have. But I feel like now especially it feels like they might not win every game. They're going to lose some of those games, but it never feels like Kentucky walks into a game and is just like, they don't look ready. They look bored. They don't look like they're not present. They don't ever seem to look like that. So I think that's one of the things that's going to be integral to this weekend. Just get through the weekend, take care of business, have a nice road trip, kind of feel each other out. Obviously you did some of that at home against Western, which is a good team, a ranked team. But this is kind of your first chance to travel and see how you travel as a team, and what does that look like, and what is staying in hotels, and what do warm-ups and serve pass, what does all that look like on the road? And this is your kind of your weekend to really figure all that out before you come home for your one home game of the non-conference, and then go and travel the rest of the way. And we talked about it. That's going to be a very big challenge. I think Kentucky, like you said, has a lot of really great vets. Obviously, Emma Grome is your setter, and she's a junior, and Eleanor Bevins, a libero, and she's a junior, and you've got a Johnny of your middle, and it's her 5th year, and Megan Wilson's a junior, and Aaron Lamb's a junior. So this is, I think, a good team to have that as a quote-unquote problem, because I think they've got a lot of games under their belt, and they have the depth, obviously, to take care of some of that stuff. But this is going to be a big weekend just in terms of go in, take care of business, feel each other out, kind of get the rhythm. Craig's talked about how this year, especially playing in Rupp, they really want to run a fast offense, even faster than usual, which is absurd to say because they've been fast the last 2 years. I'm not sure how you're going to get faster, but he seems very, very intent that they are. And so just, go in and take care of business. And I think if you're able to come out of the weekend 2-0 and heading into this next weekend against Pitt, where you're playing them at home and then 2 days later on the road at Pitt, there's going to be a lot of excitement, I think, in the program and around the state just about, what next Friday could possibly be. And Leah, why don't you talk about that? Craig's obviously pushing, really wanting to break the attendance record. What can fans do? Obviously, go to the game is a very simple answer, but what can fans do to really kind of help push that match? Because again, the attendance record is just below 10,000. I think last I looked, it's like 9,445, something like that. They played against LSU a long time ago, and so they're trying to break that record again in that match against Pitt at home next week at Rupp.
I mean, I'm always it's a sports weekend, so support everybody. So you got football next weekend, you got volleyball. So start off with volleyball. Volleyball's that night before. You're already getting your BBN juices flowing, getting ready to already cheer for a Kentucky team. I just think they deserve it. Rupp is giving us an opportunity to do things that they've never done before. You have more parking than we've ever had at Memorial, which is so cool because that means that more fans, more availability, more people are able to come. So I think use that to your advantage because you'll probably never see them in Rupp again after Memorial is completely finished. And I think it's an opportunity to be what Kentucky is and what the BBN is. It's a chance to really show out for these athletes because they deserve it. And I think the program deserves that type of support after all the years and work that Craig has put in. And now with how successful they are, like it's not like a every year, like, oh, I wonder how they're going to do. It's an every year they're consistently good now. And I think they deserve the respect of having that many fans to cheer them on and create that atmosphere. Like you want Kentucky to be a place like that was a hard place to play. I mean, it was already hard enough to play Memorial in September because it's 90 degrees on the court. So now you're sitting in an air-conditioned Rupp. How can we make this environment tough for anyone who walks in? And I think it's just taking pride in wanting to cheer on people who are putting their lives on the court every day. And I think that's like just a big thing for me is just show out. What else you got to do on a Friday night? Show out for them, support them.
That's a good point to look at this. Playing in Rupp is an opportunity. So show the program, show the powers that be how much you care about volleyball if you're a fan. And I think you're going to start to see some really cool stuff around the program happening again. Just from you all interacting on Twitter and talking about the sport more, you helped launch something like this podcast. Like KSR was like, man, the interest in volleyball is at an all-time high. What can we do to really up the coverage? And this was a really cool thing that I think was largely brought on because fans cared about the sport. And I think, again, that just kind of shows the power of that kind of stuff. Well, we're wrapping up, but why don't we, before we finish, let's do your debut Acing It with Leah segment. Why don't you talk to us a little bit about rotations? We're heading into the first weekend of play. Talk to us about that and what that looks like in volleyball.
So in volleyball, there are 6 people on the court and there are 6 zones on the court. So starting in that right back position is 1, and then you keep kind of going counterclockwise. So you go 1 is right back, 2 is right front, 3 is middle front, 4 is left front, 5 is left back, and 6 is middle back. And those are the zones on the court, spots on the court, and that's what your rotations go by. So most teams will run a rotation called a 5-1, which means that there are 5 hitters on the court and 1 setter on the court. And I know that sounds confusing because you're like, wait, there's a libero on the court. The libero is technically in for a hitter. So that means that there are 5 hitters on the court and libero comes in. And that's just a simple rotation. It's basically, very straightforward. You got 1 setter, the main setter. She's setting 5 different people on the court at any time. And usually you have a rotation called row 1. And everything is based on where the setter is located on the court. So row 1, the setter is in right back, which means that you have 3 people hitting in the front row. So let's say you got Aaron, Ajani, and Rebo in the front row. That is a 3-hitter rotation, which means that your setter is back row, which means that she cannot do anything active front row. That's why you don't see setters dump or attacking at balls. They can't because they're back row. And then you have row 2. When they rotate in a clockwise way, so everybody's moving clockwise around. So the opposite of the numbers, which don't ask me why it's like that. That's just what it is. Just to make it hard. And the crazy thing is, this is the way the U.S. do rotations. So internationally, they do rotations a completely different way. And so knowing both of them was like the most confusing thing ever. I just started telling my teams, I was like, you got to tell me it in U.S. because I just can't. I can't. And they're like, the U.S. plays volleyball just like completely different than the rest of the world, which is a really cool thing.
Of course we do.
Of course. Like we have different rules, all types of stuff. Like, international libero can't serve. So it's different when people come over here and they're like, your libero serving. And I'm like, I know, like just let it go. But continuing with rotations, and you got row 2. That means your first left side hitter is serving, and you have 3 people still front row. So that's when 1 pin will go back and serve, and a new pin will come front row. Usually your pin that's going back to serving is called an L1. They are 1 spot behind the setter. So that's how that works. They'll serve, you'll rotate, you'll be in row 3. That's a middle serving. That can either be the middle or the libero serving. Usually liberos go in for middle. And then you got row 4. That's when your setter comes front row. Now she's active and she can be offensive. She can dump, she can sling, she can do whatever. And your right front will go back row. So your right side will go back row. You'll rotate again. You're in row 5. That's when your other left side will go back row. And now you're in a two-hitter rotation, which means that there are only two hitters front row because your setter takes up one of those spots. And this is kind of the crucial time in volleyball when you have two hitters, is that's when you really want to make sure that your hitters, first of all, work really well together and both are offensive weapons, because you only have two of them front row. And so that leaves you with less options. But that's when you also see teams bring in that back row attack. So then you have three hitters still hitting. Then you have row 6. You got a middle that serves again, either libero or a middle. And then you keep doing that rotation until you hit either 25 points or win by 2. So it's an interesting thing. And I mean, that's just like the basic. I mean, sometimes you have some teams that run what's called a 6-2, which means that once that setter gets to the front row, they'll sub out. They'll bring in a right side that will come in for the setter, and a setter will come in for the right side, and that will put you back in rotation 1 and make your setter back row. So you have some teams that will do that, so they always have 3 hitters front row. It just kind of depends on your weapons. It also really depends on your setter. Sometimes you might not have a setter that's really good setting front row.
Pittsburgh has actually done that recently in some of their tournament runs. They've had right sides that can actually set. So they'll kind of do a funky one because the right side is setting. But
so it just kind of depends on your team's needs. But most of the time, you're running a 5-1, which is just plain old one setter, 5 hitters, swinging the majority of the time. And that's as simple as I could possibly tell rotations, because it can get really confusing. And it's probably one of the hardest things to teach in volleyball, because if you are off by even an inch, if you're too far in front of someone, if you get out of rotation, you start losing points. And refs are now being really, really, really on top of it. Like, you can't leave early. You can't be one step in front of this person. You have to stand where you're supposed to be. So rotations can get a little bit dicey, and it's probably the most technical part of volleyball, is knowing where you're supposed to be on the court. And it's an exciting part of it, though, because it's just really cool that someone sat and thought about all this technicality that like kind of goes over my head now, because I'm like, okay, I already know where I'm supposed to be. But from the outside perspective, you're probably like, why is she standing there?
Well, and Leah, it's something to watch for if you're a fan watching tomorrow. Like Leah mentioned, when Emma rotates to that front row and you get into those 2-hitter rotations where there are only 2 options available at the net, those are the opportunities where your team is most vulnerable to bleed points. And we have seen Kentucky struggle at times. Ajani Taylor, as great as she is, because she is undersized, it can be tough sometimes for Kentucky to side out in those instances and get back quickly to those 3-hitter rotations where Emma's back in the back row. So that's something to watch for tomorrow, and then on Saturday, this weekend in general. Just watch when Kentucky is Emma is getting in that front row. Just possibly look and see how are they handling those 2-hitter rotations. Are they siding out quickly, or are they beginning to bleed points? That's ultimately, one of the areas where your team is at its most vulnerable. And even against Western, they struggled at times siding out when it was just Ajani and Aaron Lamb in the front row. You got to make sure that those two are terminal enough that your offense doesn't become predictable. And actually, that set that Western won when they blocked Ajani to win the set, they were in a 2-hitter rotation, and it had become very apparent they're going to go to Ajani to try and side out here because the offense got stagnant, and that's what led to that block that eventually, Western took the set because of it. So that's something to watch for. Well, thank you, Leah. I think that was a perfect debut for Acing It with Leah. Like we mentioned, we're going to do that every week. It's going to be whether it's terminology or a position or breaking down a play, whatever it may be. Leah is going to teach, not just you all, me too. Look, I know volleyball in terms of, I think more than basics a little bit, but some stuff like plays and all that stuff, I'm still learning just like you all are. So yeah, you're not alone in this. I'm learning myself as well. So thank you all so much for listening. Leah, where can they follow you on Twitter?
Leah Edmond 13 is my Twitter, Instagram, all of the social medias.
And I am at HMitchell14 on Twitter. I'll be live tweeting the games this weekend. Obviously, I'll be there next Friday for the Pitt game, covering, photographing, writing, interviewing Craig, all that fun stuff. We're hoping to have a guest on next week's episode. We're not going to announce that yet. We got to wait till it's confirmed. But hoping to have possibly an athlete on or a coach next week to kind of help us prepare for that big weekend. Again, one home game against Pitt, and then they travel to Pitt to play at Pitt on the road on Sunday. So a big week in general, a big 9 days for Kentucky Volleyball as they travel this weekend to kind of start the season, and then come home for a quick one next Friday before traveling again for a pair of ranked games against a team that's currently sitting number 5, tied for 5th in Pitt. So stay tuned. It's gonna be a fun next couple days as the volleyball season kicks off. There's a lot of great games nationally this weekend too. So be sure you're following NCAA volleyball on Twitter and all that fun stuff to get kind of the marquee games as non-conference play begins. So, all right. Well, thank you, Leah. Thank you guys for listening. Make sure you tune in again next week. We are so excited to be starting this up and go on this journey with you all. We can't wait to see what's next. Thanks, guys.